Welcome to the MadTech Podcast from ExchangeWire, bringing you the latest news and views from the world of adtech, media, and marketing.
Hello and welcome to the MadTech Podcast, where we discuss the latest going on in media and marketing. I'm Amy, your host for today's episode, and I'm joined by Matt, our research lead. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks, Amy. How are you?
I'm good too, thanks. And I'm delighted to welcome our guest for today's episode, Ross Jenkins, EMEA and APAC CEO of Mediahub. Welcome to the pod, Ross. How's your week going?
Hey, Amy. Hey, Matt. Pretty good. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. It's great to have you on the pod and looking forward to our discussion today. Our stories today cover AI efforts and how the redirection of ad spend is shaping media planning and buying. So looking at Meta for our first story today, the tech giant is reportedly planning another overhaul of its AI efforts. This will be its fourth overhaul within the past 6 months. The company is expected to divide its new AI unit, Superintelligence Labs, into 4 groups: a new TBD lab, a products team including Meta AI Assistant, an infrastructure team, and the fundamental AI research lab focused on long-term research. This follows recent senior staff departures at the company, as well as a poor reception of its Llama 4 model. Ross, I'll come to you first. What can this overhaul tell us about Meta's position in the AI ecosystem currently?
I think forget AI specifically maybe first, and any company that has restructured its efforts around around its future 4 times in 6 months is clearly in a bit of trouble, right? Whether we're talking about AI or anything else, I think it suggests a lack of strategic alignment and a clear North Star, a clear sort of direction of travel. I think and then we all see the headlines about the revolving door of sort of senior talent and some of the silly amounts of money being thrown around to attract new talent and top talent into the business. I think that sort of tells its own story. I think Meta is somewhat unique or alone in trying to pursue what I believe to be a sort of a twin approach to AI. It is trying to develop an open source foundation. In Llama, it's trying to develop an open source foundation for academic research, scientific research, and it's simultaneously trying to develop consumer assistance, and those things have very different characteristics and motives and incentives, and balancing those twin paths must be very difficult.
Yeah. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I completely agree with Ross there. You could be a multi-billion-dollar giant or a local carpet shop. If you go through 4 restructures within 6 months, it's hardly a good sign. It could just be obviously a case of just giving more defined structures within its overall AI business. But why was that structure not brought in when forming this superintelligence lab unit a couple of months back? Meta obviously has, fantastic financial resources, but it's generally nowhere near front of mind in terms of media interest or consumer usage or indeed commercial usage compared to the likes of OpenAI, compared to Google's Gemini, etc. Obviously OpenAI had a pretty, tepid response to the launch of its GPT-5 model. Google's launch of Bard was a bit of a clusterfuck, but it's clawed things back there with its cleaner AI mode, and just the fact it's got that scale that Google has. But even with these wobbles, they're still way ahead of Meta, and I agree with Ross that Meta's approach just seems quite loose at the moment.
Matt, what would you say is Meta's biggest weakness when it comes to AI?
To me, I think it's the fact that it's Meta. It's got a historic track record with failure in terms of innovating, expanding in new business sectors other than obviously through inorganic acquisitions of WhatsApp and Meta. It's lost nigh on $60 billion through its, metaverse, VR reality labs division. And, is everyone walking the streets with a headset, wandering around in Zuckerberg's weird, janky metaverse at the moment? Of course not. And yeah, coming back to Ross's point in terms of that muddled approach they're doing, in terms of that consumer use of LLMs, Meta's strength is a weakness when it comes to AI. It's a social messaging video consumption platform. People are not going to necessarily be going there to use an AI platform. Every single other, consumer LLM, including Grok, which, has comparables there in terms of social platform AI add-on, they all have a front end, plug and play, go to a link, you're there in that AI platform. Whereas with Meta's models, you have to download a specific model or run it within the Meta platform, which adds that barrier to entry there. And in terms of the corporate use of LLMs, obviously, they're looking at this reorganization and thinking, oh, that's not necessarily encouraging if we're going to spend a load of money on this platform. And again, what's Meta's USP? Obviously, with OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., their AI business is at the very heart. Google has the scale of Google and obviously the wealth of data it has through its search business, and Microsoft already has its foot in the door in so many businesses, which obviously gives it a foot in the door with its Copilot systems. So it's already behind, and Meta has already managed to lose a one-horse race when it comes to the metaverse. How does it expect to win the AI race?
Yeah, definitely. Ross, what do you think about Meta's biggest weaknesses here?
Well said, Matt. Losing the one horse race, that was a false bet. No, I agree with everything you said. I think if you look at the way Meta has deployed AI to consumers, unlike Gemini is a very natural part of the search experience, right? It clearly improves the search experience for the consumer. You are making, you're creating a more informed consumer. You're helping consumers make better decisions. The use case for augmenting your social media experience with AI is a lot less clear, right? It's, and it feels somewhat adjacent to the core product, the core experience, rather than being something that's a natural, a natural fit there. And then, if you juxtapose Meta against core competitor, as Matt says, competitors are very single-minded about what their thing is for, right? And if you look at Anthropic and Claude, for example, they are developing rules-based, principle-based AI that is safer, more consistent, more repeatable, less likely to hallucinate, and that's going to be very attractive to large enterprises, to governments who are using AI to make important decisions, to automate large-scale processes, and that sort of thing. So, that makes Claude very attractive to that kind of B2B or organizational buyer, in a way that even Llama just isn't, or Meta is never going to be. So there's and I guess there's a kind of a brand baggage there with Meta as well. We all know that Meta has a fairly consistent track record of releasing things early. They're often not safe. They only react once the harms become too loud to ignore, or the voices around the harms become too loud to ignore, because they rush to monetize. They are singularly aggressive in their rush to monetize, probably more than any of the big tech platforms, and I think that may compromise them as they push into AI. Of course, that is also a strength, right? All of these AI companies are spending money faster than they are generating money, and they're going to need to recoup that investment at some point. They're going to pass on that cost to the users. Meta has a unique cash generating ability, huge cash reserves that it is an advantage that the likes of maybe OpenAI and others perhaps don't have.
On that note, do you think Meta can ever become a threat to companies that are currently leading the AI race, like OpenAI?
Yeah, yes, of course. I don't think you can count them out. I think Meta, even more so than Google, probably has a unique distribution advantage. Right? They can access billions of people every day through the three core platforms that they own. And they have a unique amount of data to train their models on, in ways that others don't, and that's a massive advantage. As we said, they have vast reserves of money that others don't, and that they're going to be able to continue to invest faster and longer than anyone else. They are using that cash to invest in their own infrastructure. We've all read the stories about investing tens of billions in new data centers and its own chip technology, and that's going to give it proprietary infrastructure, and technology is going to give it long-lasting advantages over particularly some of the more specialist players in the space. And as I said, it will push to monetize more aggressively than anybody else, and unfortunately, that is probably also an advantage. So, I think it needs to be clear on its priorities, as we said right at the top. But absolutely, it will be a threat. Right at the top of the pile, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It does have some advantages there, which the other companies don't have. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I think it will be a very successful AI business in its own right. Will it necessarily catch up to the likes of OpenAI and Google? I'm not 100% sure. I think those, it does have those barriers which at the moment seem insurmountable. Obviously, they do have an absolute mega budget, which obviously can be used to try and claw that back. So possibly, but yeah, at the moment, I don't necessarily see that. But will it become a very successful AI business due obviously because of its scale, because of the data it has? Absolutely. But yeah, maybe not surpassing the likes of OpenAI.
Yeah, we'll have to see how the AI race develops and what the coming years bring. Now, moving on to our next story, also looking at AI, but a different angle here. So looking at a new tool created by Havas. So they've developed a tool called Brand Insights AI, which aims to give advertisers a real-time ranking of their performance in search results generated by Google, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Grok, DeepSeek, and Claude. The tool sets out to address the result of consumers increasingly adopting AI search tools instead of traditional search engines. Ross, how helpful could a tool like this be for advertisers? What do you think?
This is the new frontier of search, isn't it? Consumers, forgive me, I don't know the numbers, but consumers in their hundreds of millions are shifting their search behaviors from sort of traditional search into assistants and chatbots and GPTs and so on, and so yes, it's important. I don't think we yet really understand the sort of the commercial implications the search world, the contribution of both paid and natural search to bottom lines is fairly well understood through a combination of mixed modeling and attribution and other sort of marketing measurement. I don't think we yet understand, because there isn't the click through, there isn't that direct sort of link, and because it's so nascent, I don't think we yet understand the commercial implications. But I think that yes, marketers need to be on top of this, and tools like this are going to become increasingly useful and prevalent in the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree there. Obviously, at the moment, it's quite opaque as to what results you're currently getting from these models, because it is just such a new way of operating in terms of how consumers are searching. At the moment, these tools, they're still a proxy. Per a quote within the article from Dentsu UK's Rachel Murdoch, you're sort of spamming these platforms to get results that aren't necessarily representative of users. It will never be a real view, so we do need to be mindful of that. So obviously, it's not direct results like you're getting the likes of analytics as an example. It could just be that generative AI platforms, they're waiting until there's enough of a market for measurement, and they'll roll out first-party metrics at a cost, and therefore reap the rewards of that nascent market. And of course, obviously, it could just be the case that the nebulous nature of these models makes it difficult to impossible to accurately assess how that performance is going, or at least in a way that marketers are currently familiar with.
Yeah. So, Matt, do you think these kind of metrics could bring about new challenges for advertisers?
So obviously, to that point of, the tools being used to test these platforms, basically spamming a given LLM hundreds or thousands of times to generate a large sample of responses. Given that we know, obviously, LLMs generate quite a large amount of carbon emissions for a single query, is that necessarily a good thing? Obviously, you've now got, in terms of proprietary software among agencies, you've got Havas, Kepler, WPromote, RGA, Jellyfish, Dentsu, and on top of that, you've got third-party platforms. So a lot of companies are currently targeting that, which obviously could have a carbon impact. But obviously, when you've got the third-party companies especially targeting that generative AI search measurement market, it's, again, a very shallow moat, when obviously the likelihood is that those generative AI platforms will eventually offer some kind of measurement themselves. Obviously, it's very, very understandable that advertisers are wanting to see how they perform within these search models. But obviously, on the flip side, it still doesn't address the fact that these models, by and large, are scraping a vast amount of publisher data, and they're still not being properly remunerated for it. Obviously, measurement doesn't necessarily impact on that side, but we'll see how these tools develop going forward to see if they are able to bring the publisher element into things, so that they're able to track more accurately how their content is being used and digested, and therefore how they can be compensated against that.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues within that. Ross, what are your thoughts?
I know I was going to go. It's a point well made, Matt. And it's it's something that the carbon emission as a sort of as a media agency, carbon emissions is something that we look at assiduously. We take very seriously. We've spent a lot of time developing bidding algorithms that put ads that basically mean we generate less carbon as we serve advertising, right? So we downweight, made for advertising pages that are sort of stuffing ads, creating a lot of carbon that way. We have various feeds in from companies like Scope 3 to understand the carbon output of pages we're serving into, and we factor those scores into. It is something we take seriously. I was going to go a slightly different direction, which is just that this is such a new and evolving space, and these models are evolving. They are evolving really fast, right? They're getting better all the time. We don't truly know. We have a sense, but unlike traditional SEO, which is fairly well codified now as a discipline, we don't really know what the levers are to pull. Right. And so from a marketer's perspective, the ability to make, we over the last 15 years, we've all become a little bit obsessed with sort of, direct tracking and measurement. And in some ways, the measurement tail wags the strategy dog. And that's led to short-termism in marketing and to the detriment of marketing, I think. overall. And so we don't understand the levers very well for driving presence in in these kind of answer engines. It's technology that's evolving very fast, so we're not likely to sort of codify our learning anytime soon, and it could just lead to a lot of wasted effort, right? A lot of sort of chasing our own tails and pulling the wrong levers as we try to influence visibility. So I back to the start, I think it's useful. It's a directional measure that we should keep an eye on, but I think we just need to beware that, again, as marketers, we're very good at chasing the latest shiny object without really knowing what the commercial imperative is. A bit of circumspection needed, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, Ross, it's a nascent area, and I'm sure we'll see, more and more challenges come up around the area as it develops and as advertisers and agencies start to kind of understand it more and get to grips with how it all works and how it's changing the ecosystem. Now, moving on to our third and last story, taking a look at ad spend in the holdco agency landscape. So research from Advertiser Perceptions, a market intelligence firm, demonstrates the diminishing role of holding companies in the total US ad market. In 2019, almost half of US ad spend came from the big six holdcos, and this figure decreased significantly over the following 5 years, with holdcos accounting for just 28% of ad spend in 2024. And this data covers just the first 3 quarters of last year. So smaller brands are increasingly turning to independent agencies who can likely offer them more attention than a global holdco, which may be devoting more resources to its biggest clients. And the transition to programmatic marketplaces and automated campaign processes has also been moving budgets towards walled garden big tech platforms over the past few years, as these platforms have given advertisers tools which allow them to bypass agency groups. Yet the majority of US marketers still use agencies for media planning and buying last year. Ross, do you think the agency industry is in trouble?
I hope not. Mediahub, which I run in Europe and Asia, is we're part of a holding company. We're part of IPG, one of the big six. Obviously, going through a merger with Omnicom, and we're growing. We're growing very nicely, thank you. We've doubled in size in just over 3 years. We're gonna grow 20% this year. So, look, I think it's much more nuanced. I think, and in our world, we're a little bit, we're not of the size of our sister agencies, and so we attract a different kind of client, different kind of opportunity. So that's part of it. That's part of our growth story. But I'm actually going to challenge the stat, right? I think we have got a lot better at counting the amount of money spent in advertising, largely because I think my surmise is that lots of small advertisers have shifted money away over the last decade, and I think this is accelerating away from things like classifieds and B2B advertising into the platforms where it is very, very countable. And so I think that's grown the whole number, making the holdco number look proportionately smaller. So I think the data probably exaggerates the gap. Anyway, that's not to ignore the question. I think the stat inflates the dynamic. I think it depends on the agency and how they're adapting to the structural shift, right? As money moves into big tech, that is democratizing the media industry. It's lowering the sort of the protective moat that media agencies built around clout and scale and footprint and sort of all those things that meant you kind of had to use an agency. And biddable media has sort of has democratized it as well. So there are very big disintermediating factors that are making it harder for the big six to compete. I still think that the holdcos uniquely have the product market fit to look after very, very large global brands, right? Those global brands want to be everywhere. They need teams who can execute, in markets all over the world. Buying power still matters. So, I think that's still the unique province of the big holdcos. But I think the bottom line is that in this world of AI, the agencies that adapt by investing in strategy and analysis, analytics and creativity, supported by proprietary IP and proprietary technology, will be fine, right? And I don't think that's about holdcos or indies. I think that's just that's the sort of that's the mandate, really. That's the path to to success.
Yeah, adapting, definitely. Can you expand a bit more then about how agencies can really adapt in the current environment?
Yeah, I think it starts with a really strong value proposition. Media about 18 months ago, we repositioned. We'd always been known as the media agency for challenger brands, and we felt we'd sort of outgrown that a little bit. Plus, we're just sort of restless kind of people, always looking to renew, and we repositioned around more pilot, less auto, right? And more pilot, less auto is a sort of it's people driving technology rather than technology driving people, right? It's avoiding the risk of sort of over automation, the lack of critical thinking, the lack of challenge around a brief. And keeping the human at the center. I think that is about, that's about helping brands navigate this very tech-driven world. And it's about being more than a commodity buyer, right? It's a value proposition built around around the word agent, right? What we do is offer unbiased expert advice and help clients orchestrate the right choices, right? So I think a strong value proposition is critical, and that has to be about growth and unbiased advice rather than sort of commoditized factors like buying. I think you need differentiated IP. Right, models, frameworks, tools, proprietary technology to support that value proposition, because otherwise you're just kind of, you're just borrowing, and I think that's a dangerous place to be. You have to, we have to be able to augment what big tech is telling us. Right, we have to be able to augment what is natively available in the platforms, because everybody has access to that. If we can augment our clients' understanding of who their audience is and how to reach them and how to impact them, and how to understand those results and use those results to improve the media plan, then I think we'll be fine. I think it's also about talent. I think it's about creating new forms of AI-enabled hybrid talent, strategists that understand marketing science and know how to construct their own agents to help them develop strategy that's built on marketing science, right? But what's in the public domain and what our own models are saying about our clients' business. I think it's about creative talent that is augmented with a better understanding of culture. Again, using AI. So more hybridized, more augmented talent, I think is probably a big part of that, that success formula as well.
Yeah, definitely. And Matt, do you agree with Ross about the current outlook at the moment for agency holdcos, and what do you think about the situation?
Yeah, I completely agree. These agencies aren't in trouble. It's simply an evolving space, and obviously, the role of agencies it's to be an intermediary. And if you have a fantastic agency that gets you the most value for your ads, while reducing all the headaches of trying to coordinate campaigns across multiple different platforms, partners, channels, etc. Or heaven forbid, having to do things in house. Absolutely brilliant. If you have an agency which doesn't necessarily bring those benefits that are right for your company, it's easier to move away from them because they're not, at the beginning nor at the end of the supply chain. In terms of that relationship, or difference between the holdcos versus the independents, it's kind of like how the travel industry's evolved. I think years ago you would go to one travel agency in your town, pick one of their packages, set up a payment plan, bish bash bosh. Nowadays, you've got more piecemeal and customizable options, your Skyscanners, your Booking.coms, your Airbnbs. You can still use these platforms to book, all-inclusive end-to-end holiday, or, you can choose what's right for your expertise. Oh, I know the area, I'll just book a hotel there rather than doing the full end-to-end package. So people are still using intermediaries, and there is still a role for the holdcos and the independents. But yeah, it's just a more evolved space than previously.
Yeah. Would you say we're kind of moving in a more positive direction then?
I wouldn't necessarily say positive, negative. I think it's just how the industry is evolving. Obviously, as to Ross's points earlier, you've got a lot more spend going towards the platforms, and you've got to be able to, like I say, work with what's best for your individual company. Obviously, we had the prior to all the recent chat around AI, we had the years-long debate around in-housing, and ultimately the fact that the vast majority of brands still use an external agency in some way or another, proves the difficulty in coordinating marketing and the value of using an agency to get that right. So yeah, there is definitely still a role for agencies of all forms in the future. I just think it's going to be a lot more individualized depending on the brand, and I think that is a positive in and of itself. It's not a one size fits all approach. It's what works best for a brand, their particular situation, their particular audience they're looking for, and for the consumer that can only be a positive, because marketing won't be sort of one homogenous blob anymore. It's going to be more customized to what they're targeting as a brand. So yeah, I think it's broadly positive.
Yeah, more diverse outcomes there for consumers, which is a good thing. Yeah. But I think that's a good note to finish on. Thanks so much, Ross, for joining us. It was great to have all your
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
It's a pleasure.
And thanks, Matt, as always, for joining us.
Thanks, Aimee. Absolute pleasure. Yeah, really interesting conversation today.
Yeah, really good discussion. And that's it for today. Join us again next week.
Welcome to the MadTech Podcast from ExchangeWire, bringing you the latest news and views from the world of ad tech, media, and marketing.